President Francis, how would you reflect on the first few months of your term, and what do you hope this body accomplishes in 2024?
The first few months, I would have to say, unexpectedly tumultuous. Lots going on in the international system, the international political system. Of course, we've had the war between Israel and Hamas. That has really been the headliner in terms of disruption of peace and security, international peace and security, though we've had, before that, the situation in Ukraine. And then, of course, there's the situation in Africa, where so many of the countries on the continent are now engaged in internal conflict. So the first 2 or so months of the presidency has been challenging, but the challenge is not so much for the presidency as it is for the entire system, the international system. And what do I hope to accomplish for 2024? Well, for 2024, we've got a really big process underway, and that is the Summit of the Future, where the UN, in conjunction with stakeholders, and this is very important, stakeholders right across the spectrum will sit down to come up with a plan of action to address the pressing global challenges that we are confronting now, but not just now, those that are on the horizon and which will require transformational change. So things like artificial intelligence, for example, will fall within the purview of the Summit of the Future. Things like digitalization, questions of health and education, that really will make a difference in terms of people's daily lives.
As you mentioned, the situation in Gaza has really dominated headlines here at the United Nations and around the world. Thousands of people are dead. The situation has been very violent, and the UN has been pushing for a ceasefire. You've personally met with relatives of those taken hostage by Hamas. Why do you think this situation is more difficult to resolve than ever?
Well, the fact is that this, as you know, is a long-standing conflict. It's got layers and layers of issues on top of it. And there have been frequent resolutions by the Security Council and by the General Assembly, most of which have not been implemented over the years. This particular situation is complicated because illegal activity cannot resolve disputes. So, for example, the decision by Hamas to do what it did is not a decision that can be supported. It ought not to have done that. Now, Hamas is not a country. We must bear that in mind. It's a group. But it is not the right thing to kidnap people and take them as hostage away from their families. On the other hand, while it is true that the Israelis have got the right of self-defense, the prescriptions on the conduct of war denies the right of anyone to be excessive and disproportionate in their response. And more than that, underscores the necessity to protect civilians in conflict. And we have seen where too many civilians have lost their lives in Gaza. So there are all sorts of complications there, emotional, historical, psychological. Terror, of course, is not an easy thing. And of course, there are the underlying political considerations in a very complex region. But I'm hopeful because once there is a dialogue between the combatants, between the parties, the possibilities for resolution come onto the table. This is not going to be an easy process because it's been in existence for a very long time. Many have tried in the past, come close to success, but then there's been a collapse. However, a negotiated solution is the only way out that will guarantee the Israelis their right to live within secure borders in peace and security, and guarantee the Palestinians their right for a homeland. And so as the United Nations, we adhere to and promote the two-state solution because it's really the only credible way for lasting peace and security to the Palestinian question.
We know that more than 100 UN aid workers have been killed in Gaza. That's more than any other conflict in UN history. Will this loss of life impact missions and operations in the future?
I'm sure it will, individually, not institutionally or organizationally, because it's very difficult. I read a WhatsApp message, I think it was on Saturday morning, posted by the Director General of the World Health Organization, in which his words were to the effect, my staff and I have been saddened because finally a member of our team was killed this morning alongside her 6-month-old baby and her husband and daughter, all in one family. These are real people. They've got friends, they've got colleagues who survive, and therefore it cannot be an easy thing individually going to one of these conflict zones without thinking, will I return to my family? Consider the angst and the anxiety that families will feel if family members are deployed in such contentious zones of conflict. But institutionally and organizationally, the UN remains fully committed, and the staff remains fully motivated to carry out their responsibilities and to do the humanitarian work consistent with the principles of the UN Charter and with the Universal Declaration on Human Rights.
Within the UN, at the Security Council, and even outside the United Nations, China has been working with the international community in many different ways, different outreach, to find stability in the Middle East. Foreign Minister Wang Yi recently paid a visit to United Nations headquarters. And for you as a longtime career diplomat, how important are the different voices, the different perspectives when it comes to trying to solve major conflicts?
It's extremely important because conflicts are not unidimensional. And that's part of the complication of the Gaza conflict, as indeed is the case in Ukraine. There are layers and layers and layers. There's precedent. There are pre-existing situations that trigger countries to behave in certain ways. And so it's very important that all the voices are heard. Everyone, that's the nature of multilateralism.
Small or large?
Small or large. It is the core of multilateralism, that durable solutions, permanent solutions, are not feasible and cannot be imposed by a few. You need the collaborative voices of all to accept and to take ownership for the outcomes and the solutions that will resolve long-standing contentious issues. And so that is the magic, I think is the word, the magic of multilateralism. It's never perfect. Multilateralism never makes a claim to be perfect. What it does claim to do is to avoid tensions and to make everyone feel comfortable that they can live with a result that is suboptimal but workable. That's the magic.